Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com, an action-packed show here today on Real America's Voice. I don't want to waste any time here because we have, if you'll remember, last week I was singing the praises of this website, everylegalvote.com. And I said at the time, I said, hey, I don't know who's running this. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know what the deal is here. But it's an incredibly useful site. It's incredibly well functioning, well set up. It's got all the bells and whistles. You've got everything you need all in one place. And then I figured it out. I've actually been to the studio of the founder of this website in Texas. It's Kevin Freeman. It's Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room, and he joins us now on the show. Kevin, I got a bone to pick with you. Why didn't you tell me it was you behind everylegalvote.com?
Well, Raheem, you're doing great work at America's Voice and telling the truth to the American people. But this thing came together so fast. A citizens coalition, patriots, just a group of us said, hey, look, the court of public opinion needs to be aware that there is a legitimate voter fraud. They need to be aware and have a place to talk about it because Twitter and Facebook are banning it. And we need to have social patience for the process to work out so that every legal vote is counted.
Look, it's an incredible site, and I will say to the audience, again, like I said last week, you need to go to everylegalvote.com. It's got all the resources, everything you need in one place, a fraud primer, the maps, the latest stories from how this works and what's going on all around the world as it pertains to this mail-in voter fraud. You have as your top recent story at the moment, France banned mail-in voting in 1975. We had Jerome Riviere, a member of the French delegation to the European Parliament, in studio with us last week, who walked us through all of that, and it's true. The United Kingdom did institute mail-in voting in 2001, and we've seen nothing but fraud in our elections since as a result of it. So, Kevin, let me ask you this question. What are you trying to achieve with this website? You've done a very good job putting it together very quickly. What are you trying to achieve with this website, and how far have you got so far?
Well, what we're trying to achieve is to educate and inform the American public about the real risks of voter fraud. There is no doubt that fraud occurred in this past election. There is no doubt that it occurs in every election, but this time was worse than ever before. And we launched this website 1 week ago today. And since then, we have seen 2 million unique visitors. And those unique visitors have clicked our Take Action button and sent over 1.6 million emails to legislators in the key states that need to take action, that need to ensure that we have a free and fair election here.
That's incredible. That is an incredible number. And congratulations to you guys for doing that. Let me ask you this. You said that you've basically got no doubt that election fraud happened in this election. The mainstream media will turn around to you and say, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a nut job, you should be deplatformed from everything. What is your evidence when you say you have no doubt that there's been voter fraud here?
Well, more than 10,000 reports of people sending in evidence where they said that they requested a ballot and they got 3 of them, or their dog voted, or their mother who has dementias in a nursing home voted, or their great grandfather who's passed away 40 years ago has voted when they checked. I mean, there's all kinds of election fraud, but the one that's really bad is the vulnerability of our election systems, like Dominion systems and ES&S and so forth. And this isn't me talking. You can look at the New York Times that put a video on how easily these can be hacked, and we put that up on our site. You can look at a letter that Elizabeth Warren and other Democrat senators signed a year ago saying they were worried about this. You can look at article in medium.com. You can look at Kill Chain, the documentary on HBO. I mean, this is not conspiracy theorists. This is real world stuff, and these systems are very vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what? I mean, what are we talking about specifically, and what are the witness statements or affidavits that what are they saying in terms of Is it, hey, this person lived at my address 10 years ago, but they no longer live here, and somehow a ballot was cast in their name from this residence? So just walk us through a few of the examples here.
All of it. It is, for example, witnesses where they've said we were mailed multiple ballots, or we used a Sharpie. We've got, I think, 1,000 reports of people that used a Sharpie, then checked to see if their vote had counted and it hadn't counted. Or there's examples where people have maiden names. They said my maiden name, I checked my maiden name to see if I voted with my Social Security number. So there's even a spot on our Take Action where you can check to see if your vote was counted. Example after example after example. But not just that. The Dominion Systems and others, we've got video where they're trying to sell their system, and people are asking, hey, can you wholesale change votes? That's a feature. It's a feature that you can change votes. So there's inside plays of people that could change votes, and then there are outside plays where people could hack in. And we have hackers that could sit in the parking lot. And we've covered this in the Economic War Room for over 2 years. We had Russ Ramsland, who's now become a superstar in this area, on our program, and we had a white hat hacker who worked for a very elite agency. His code name is Jekyll. And he walked us through. He actually sat down and said, here in the dark web are all the passwords to all the voting systems. Here, by the way, and he started to show it on camera, are all the people with names and addresses and how they voted for the past 20 years. And we said, Jekyll, don't show that. We'll get in all kinds of trouble because that information is not, wow. We don't have permission to make that public. But that's how vulnerable the system. So economicwarroom.com/myvote, and you can see these videos that we did before the election warning what would happen.
All right, Kevin, stick with us. I know we got you for another segment. You're a very busy man. You're doing a lot of great work. Stick with us. We're going to bring you back here on the National Pulse on Real America's Voice in just a second. Stick around. Well, it was incredibly entertaining and informative this morning to watch Jack Dorsey being held to account by Senator Ted Cruz and others, and indeed Senator Blumenthal, who was asking Mark Zuckerberg this morning, hey, why haven't you taken Steve Bannon off Facebook? He said put their heads on pikes. No, he never said put their heads on pikes. He was using a historical metaphor to describe something that is easily findable on the internet as a means by which to, prompt the idea that we're unhappy with public servants, and this is something that we've known for hundreds of years in the Western world, and it's an allegory, it's a metaphor, it's a turn of phrase for things that we've seen over the last couple of hundred years in terms of government bureaucrats getting over their own heads. And let me be very clear about something, because I know Steve won't say it himself, because he doesn't even want to give the other side any leeway, any rope, any succor in this regard. Mark Zuckerberg actually gets irony. That's the funny thing about it. The guy that we have called a robot for the last 10 years actually gets irony better than our media class. Actually gets irony better than the left, than the Democrat Party, than Senator Blumenthal. Think about how bad the left has become. That Mark Zuckerberg understands the difference between the literal mind and the ironic mind. I just had to make mention of that this morning, because I know that this afternoon rather, because I know that this morning Steve, he kind of doesn't want to give them any leeway in their stupid arguments. But I'll explain it here. And for everybody watching that's of the political left, and I know you like to watch us, I know you like to know what we're thinking, just the same way I watch CNN. Nosce hostem, right? Know thy enemy. I want to bring back Kevin Freeman here. Kevin is the host of Economic War Room and the co-founder of Every Legal Vote. I really do like the fact that the last two shows we've done, we dive straight in to the money. And Kevin, you're seeing that in real time on your site with this audience right here on Real America's Voice and the National Pulse. They are flocking to the site. Tell us a little more about what you're seeing on your device in front of you.
Yeah, well, I just looked. When we started, we were a little over 1.6 million emails to legislators. We just passed 1.7 million, and I believe it's your viewership that dove in. And they're sending emails to critical legislators, secretaries of state and others in the swing states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, telling them basically, and you can find out what you're doing when you click through it. You can edit the email that you're sending. But I'm getting reports back that this is having a major impact. Legislators are saying, hey, we're going to try and fix this. We hear you. We hear you. They really are getting impacted, and your viewers are a part of that. It's huge.
Why do you feel the need to have people en masse writing to legislators? Is not the law alone, is not the Constitution alone enough to hold these people to the supposed vows they took, the supposed oaths that they swore to uphold the Constitution?
They need to know. It's important because, honestly, they are the constitutional officers who determine who the electors are, the state legislators, but they need to know that the American people care about this. They have an onslaught. You mentioned Jack Dorsey and Twitter. It was the funniest thing last night. I was having dinner with David Harris Jr., and I said, hey, pull out your device, because he's got 651,000 Twitter followers. I said, tweet out everylegalvote.com. I expected what would happen to him, the same thing that happened to Ned Ryan 2 days earlier, is that something went wrong, we can't tweet that. But boom, it goes through. Why did that tweet, everylegalvote.com tweet, go through? It went through because Jack Dorsey was testifying before Congress today, and he told him to knock that stuff off while he was testifying. It's the funniest thing. That's why the legislators need the encouragement, because Facebook and Twitter and the media are all telling them this thing's over. Don't look at it again. You'll be a problem if you do. We're telling them you'll be a patriot if you do. Do your constitutional duty.
Kevin, a lot of people out there, and by the way, I've just tweeted it myself, everylegalvote.com, just put it up on my Twitter. I don't have 675,000. I have but a paltry 327,000 followers on my Twitter. But Kevin, I just tweeted it out for you there, and I'll be interested to know what the feedback is as well. I want to put these graphs up while Kevin's on with us here as well, to show from the website what these guys are showing, what these guys are telling us on everylegalvote.com with voter fraud. Joe Biden at 306 to Donald Trump's 232 electoral college votes. Without voter fraud, however, 220 Joe Biden electoral college votes versus Donald Trump's 318 electoral college votes. Kevin, a lot of people out there are black-pilled at the moment. They're really dejected. They're really down in the dumps. They don't see a pathway forward. They don't even think, and forgive me, Mr. President, for saying this, but they don't think that the president is doing enough to fight his corner. So why? What are we doing this for? What is the point in this? Isn't this over? We're told it's over.
Yeah, we were told it's over, and Mike Flynn was told that his case was over too. And in steps Sidney Powell with Release the Kraken. There is a quality legal team working on this now. What they need is the public opinion to stay open to the idea of social patience. I mean, Al Gore got 37 days or something to go through his court cases. President Trump deserves at least that amount of time, given the amount of fraud that we're finding. So we're here to help people be encouraged, to learn more, to understand, to report their stories, and to take action. That's the purpose of everylegalvote.com. And by the way, I think we're a social media sharing site, because people can share their stories, they can read other people's stories, and they can take action. I think we're better than Twitter or Facebook, either one.
Kevin, I see that hashtag behind you, hashtag social patience. What does that mean?
Well, it's the idea that, we have to have social distancing, and we have social this and social that. We need as a society to let the process work through. The Constitution lays out a process. There's an election day in November, and in this case, it started in September in some places, and then October and so forth. But there's a prescribed election day in November, and then we elect electors as the state legislature is determined, and then they meet together in an electoral college, and then you have the president presented to Congress, and then you have the inauguration day. And that's spread out over a couple of months for precisely this reason, so that we can really truly understand the will of the people and count every legal vote. The sovereign in America is we the people.
Yeah. Kevin, the website is everylegalvote.com. Where else should people go?
economicwarroom.com/myvote.
Kevin, we thank you for taking the time out with us today. Get back to your amazing work that you're doing. Kevin Freeman, host of the Economic War Room, everylegalvote.com. The National Pulse returns in just a moment. Well, these hours go so quickly, these 1 hour segments we have here at 3 p.m. on Real America's Voice, when you have the best guests in the business on everything that matters pertaining to the election and everything around the election. Remember, it's not over. That lady hasn't sung. We're not at the end. If anything, we're in a really, really interesting position here. Molly McCann, who's off counsel with Sidney Powell, joins us down the line now, straight after Kevin Freeman. A hard act to follow, Molly, but I've no doubt that you can do it. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Molly, on the War Room this morning, we go through a lot of things. We have all sorts of great guests on, talking about their lawsuits, talking about what's going on in Nevada, talking about what's going on in Wisconsin. I walked through a lot of the data that's coming out of this statisticians group that we put together just after the election occurred to go through the detail. And the detail does indeed look murkier and murkier the more data that we feed into these statisticians. But let's park that for a second and let's look at what you've been looking at now today, which is what's going on in Georgia. Can you give us an update on the state of play there? Because not just are we looking at some serious chicanery as it pertains to the election and the recount, but we're also looking at this from the perspective of a runoff election taking place in very short order. And it's very close from all the polling that I've seen, and I've seen some private polling this morning, which really puts my mind at the opposite of ease in terms of how close that race is going to be. It's going to be a get out the vote election rather than a change anyone's minds election. And when you have a get out the vote election, you need to know that the vote is being fairly counted. So Molly, is the vote being fairly recounted in Georgia?
Not at all, Raheem. Unfortunately, Lynn Wood has filed a federal lawsuit in his personal capacity, and he's challenging the consent decree that the Secretary of State in Georgia entered into with the Democrat Party. And essentially what the consent decree does is it makes it much harder to challenge fraudulent ballots as they're counting the ballots initially. It might seem like it's more stringent. That the Secretary of State and the Democrats agreed to have essentially a panel. Before, the legislature said it, so if you got an absentee ballot and you couldn't match the signature, you yourself, if you're counting, you can just write rejected on the ballot and it's rejected. Now, according to this consent decree, the ballot counters must seek out 2 other ballot counters to consider whether or not to throw out the ballot. And that might sound like it's a more stringent and a higher bar, but it actually really lowers the bar because it disincentivizes people to throw out ballots to begin with. And of course, your fellow counters could throw a flag. So it makes it much harder to have a stringent standard of making sure our absentee ballots are legal votes with signatures that match signatures on file. And Lynn Wood is arguing, and I think very persuasively, that the Secretary of State and the Democrats were completely unconstitutional and out of line in essentially thwarting the choice of the legislature with these new rules.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an American. So you're going to have to explain to me here, Molly, where this goes from here, because in my mind, I'm but a humble, West London boy that grew up looking at America and thinking, wow, that place is amazing. It's so free. They can do whatever they want. Government doesn't intervene with them. Elections are free and fair, and nobody will ever, pardon my exposition, F with the United States of America and its legal system and its electoral system. And so my mind goes, okay, well, all right, the Georgia stuff messed up, doesn't work. Supreme Court, right? But just explain to me, is that true? Like, how does that work?
Well, it is a matter of statutory interpretation. And one of the things that I'm or sort of a matter of statutory interpretation. One of the things that I'm really pushing people to remember is that judges can disagree. So Lin Wood has made a persuasive argument why this consent decree was inappropriate, and this is not how the ballot should be counted. But a federal district judge may see it differently. I suspect it will go up the chain. It may very well end in the Supreme Court. I do not know. Ultimately, though, I think what we're going to find in Georgia, I think we're going to find it in Pennsylvania as well, and possibly other states. We are going to find that the elections in these states have been tainted beyond repair. We have mixed in legal ballots with illegal ballots, and then it really is going to be potentially kicked to the states. So the grassroots, and I know you've been discussing this, Raheem, in other venues, and a lot of us are talking about it politically behind the scenes and trying to get ready, but the grassroots must be ready to lobby their legislatures and to push for the votes not to be certified. We cannot certify elections where we cannot be certain that the ballots are legal. So the United States of America has become a banana republic in this election season. It breaks my heart as an American, but the American people have to stand up and say no more. The Democrats have tainted it, and they expect us to just say, well, I guess you can win. We need to say this time, no, you don't get to win this time. We are going to kick it to our legislatures. And the legislatures, they can send electors to the Electoral College to vote for Trump if they choose.
Molly, it breaks my heart as well. I mean, it breaks my heart not least because, you know, sometimes it takes the outside perspective for Americans to realize, you know, what they had. And I appreciate that a lot of the outside voices that have come into America over the past couple of decades haven't exactly been the most constructive. I make the most sincerest apology on behalf of all of my countrymen for the fact that we foist Piers Morgan on you for a very long period of time. And there have been others that have been absolutely destructive as far as the Republic is concerned. But it does break my heart. It breaks my heart because as I'll say this, and people won't believe that I was once a little boy, but I was. As a little boy, you know, I used to watch American television shows. I used to watch American news coverage. I used to watch sitcoms and whatever, and just look. Friends isn't a representative of the United States of America, but there was still that underlying, whatever the producers and the writers knew about these sitcoms that are pumped out all around the world, there was still this kind of underlying thing that actually America is a much different place from anywhere else in the world. And unfortunately, this election has shown us that it can very easily be turned into the worst parts of the world if we allow it to be the case. So, you know, a lot of people ask me, Molly, you know, I understand why you, as a red-blooded American-born person, would fight for your nation. A lot of people ask me, why are you so concerned? It's the last bastion out there. It's the last vestige of what we have known as Westphalian traditions for so very long. And you look at what the alternatives are out there, which is the Chinese Communist Party's alternatives, the Banana Republic alternatives, the European Union's alternatives. And what these all really account for is broader Bolshevism, centralized, corrupt control, power handed to the elites. We'll talk to Molly McCann more after. Well, there's no big corporate sponsor here. As you can probably tell, there's no big corporate sponsor over at thenationalpulse.com. As you can probably tell, we're a small team of people, and a lot of us, I say us, a lot of the people that have joined us at thenationalpulse.com are doing it off their own backs. They're volunteers. They care about their country. They care about America. They might not even be Americans. They build graphics, they build websites, they chip in, they write articles, they're doing research, they're interested, they're focused. Because they understand the thing that I said in the last segment, which is this is the high ground, and we cannot lose it. If you want to help us, go to thenationalpulse.com/support, and we appreciate each and every one of you. I do not have a billionaire backer signing over checks to us. I really do not. That just does not exist. Everything you see here We're doing it. We're doing it. And we're not making money. We're not profiteering. Believe me, we're still in the red. We're not in the black. We're doing it. So fundrealnews.com is the URL to go to if you want to help us. And I think it's imperative that we all put our shoulders to the wheel here. And if that's not something that you want to do, fine. Put your shoulders to the wheel in another way. I don't begrudge you that. That's absolutely that's your prerogative. I want to bring back Molly McCann. Molly is of counsel with Sidney Powell, and she's just an excellent resource on everything that's going on all around the country, but especially paying attention to the state of Georgia at the moment. So, Molly, okay, talk us a little bit more through some of the constituent parts of the problem you have with the recount.
Well, as I was discussing in your earlier segment, Lin Wood has this federal lawsuit, and he's challenging elements of the recount. The recount we're finding out is purely performative. And this has been happening for years. We've just been told to kind of accept that there are discrepancies in these elections, and it really must stop. We were promised a results recount in Georgia. We are not getting that. Lin Wood has 2 affidavits in his federal lawsuit from women who were supposed to oversee the recount and be observers to make sure it was fair. And when they showed up to their various locations, they were either told the recount was concluded, or the ballots have been counted overnight and were already boxed up. Very disturbing stories from Lin Wood in his suit about the recount. And then Project Veritas has some videos, some undercover, or not even undercover, some people who were observing the recount. And one gentleman has explained how he watched a woman count a vote for Trump and call it for Biden multiple times in a 3-minute period. And they don't have enough people to watch all of the recounts. We're just being taken for a ride here. Most of the nation thinks that we're doing due diligence in Georgia. And when they announce the results that Joe Biden still won, it's going to severely demoralize the MAGA movement. And it's going to solidify further in the minds of half the nation that Joe Biden is the winner of the 2020 election. So this recount is an absolute outrage to our system. And you have to wonder, where in the world is Governor Kemp?
Well, you tell me. I mean, hold on. I mean, not just Governor Kemp, but yeah, of course, especially Governor Kemp. But where are all the Republicans that have rode on the coattails of the president for the last 4 years? They have been fundamentally unpopular in their states. They have eked to victory where they have had victories. They have suffered diabolical losses to the point where you don't even think they were even competing in the places that they had losses. And they've ridden on the president's coattails for so very long. Where are these people now?
Raheem, I do not know. I've long believed that Donald Trump formed a new party when he won in 2016. The MAGA movement is something new. It's made up of a new demographic. And unfortunately, though, I think a lot of the people in leadership are sort of the old Republicans. They don't want to fight. They don't want to look crazy in the media. They don't want to potentially damage their future careers. And we have a real problem with backbone right now across the GOP. And I'm not saying that's everyone. I don't want to be too sweeping. I know there are wonderful and good people in the GOP working very hard right now for Trump. But far too many, I think, are simply not new nationalist Republicans.
Listen, it's a point that isn't lost on me, and I think the audience needs to hear more about that. So, Molly, I hope at some point you can come back and talk about what that is, a nationalist Republican. I know everybody has their own kind of view on this, and I have mine, and I'd love to hear what yours is in terms of more of that as well. Let me ask you this question. So we had Kevin Freeman on in the last segment. He was talking about everylegalvote.com. It's an incredible website, a great resource. It shows people where the race could be if we actually counted every legal vote versus where the race is in the media's mind, where they're counting every illegal vote and every unsubstantiated vote in that whole thing. But you talked about certification in the last segment, and I want to know from you, Molly, because a lot of people look up to you. You have a massively increasing social media presence. People take what you say to heart and they act on it. Do we need something like a Stop the Certification .com website where people can write to their legislators and write to whoever's in a position to stop this happening, to say, hey, we know this is not real, whether it's through the circumstantial evidence of the data and the statisticians, what they're going through, whether it's the signed affidavits from people who have seen what's going on here, whether it's from the fact that the Georgia recount isn't a real recount and we know it's not a real recount. Do we need to now move on to another constituent part of this campaign, which is, okay, your time is up. You had your chance to prove to us that you could be fair actors. You're not fair actors. We're not going to accept the certification here.
Absolutely, Raheem. People keep asking me, can we win this election? And the answer is, we can win this election if we're willing to go the distance. We're willing to do what needs to be done perfectly within the bounds of the law and the strictures of the Constitution. We can absolutely win this, but it's going to take some real guts on the part of the American people. I have a lot of faith in the various lawsuits that are being filed right now, but the truth of the matter is everyone has to work on every level, and it is now time for the grassroots to rise up and defend this republic. And it starts, I believe, in the battleground states. We need to get organized in every single state and begin to lobby our legislatures to make sure they understand that we do not believe that the results of this election are true, fair, or democratic, and we expect them to do their constitutional duty, which is potentially, if we cannot sort out which ballots are legal and which are not, we're not going to throw up our hands and say you win to the Democrats. The legislature must step in, and they must send a slate of pro-Trump electors to the Electoral College. And that really is a grassroots movement, because it has to be the people telling the legislators that they approve of this that will give the legislators the courage to do what they need to do. This will not be easy. The media and the world are all applauding President-elect Joseph Biden. Flipping this back red is doable, but it's going to take courage.
I agree. Molly, we are up against the hard break here. Where can people find you on social media?
At Molly McCann, Twitter.
At Molly McCann on Twitter. We'll make sure we pump out Molly's website as well. We'll be back. Thanks to Molly McCann. We'll be back with more National Pulse after this short break. A press conference expected from the Nevada GOP later on today, talking about more in terms of the election fraud that's being uncovered in that state. I was incredibly grateful to be joined by Ellen Swenson from the Election Integrity Project California and Nevada yesterday. That's very different from the Transition Integrity Project. She was just a wealth of information. Those guys are going door to door trying to figure out what's going on, whether the votes match up with the ballots that were mailed out, unsolicited ballots that were mailed out all across the country and returned. And I've spoken to somebody that I know this audience respects a ton, which is Nigel Farage, who has been going through this in terms of mail-in vote fraud, as we call it in the United Kingdom, postal vote fraud, for over a decade now. And I spoke to him this morning on the phone, and I haven't got his clearance to tell you what we were talking about on the phone this morning, but I imagine he wouldn't mind me telling you that he said, and I'll try and do his voice as well, he said, Raheem, mail-in voting fraud has been the bane of my existence. And it has, because every single time the UK Independence Party or the Brexit Party came anywhere close to winning an election, mostly special elections, what we call by-elections in the United Kingdom, suddenly overnight a bunch of ballots were found that tipped the Labour Party, it's usually the left-wing Labour Party, over the edge. And Nigel said to me immediately after the election, he said, Raheem, people need to be going door to door, knocking on the doors of nursing homes, knocking on the door of low-income, low-voting propensity neighbourhoods and going, hey, 7 people voted from this household. Are they real? Do they live here? Do they still live here? Did they ever live here? And you'll find, like Ellen Swenson told us yesterday, you'll find that people will actually sign witness statements to say, no, that person hasn't lived here in 5 years. That person hasn't even lived in the state. And yet they're presumably casting a ballot. I am thinking about this long and hard at the moment. As you can probably tell, the audience of this show knows me and knows my demeanor, knows my persona pretty well. And you can probably tell today that I'm incredibly pensive about what's going on here. I'm pensive because of what we saw at the election, but I'm pensive as well about what we saw this weekend in Washington, D.C. And I'll bring on a big man who's in incredibly big demand at the moment. It's Jack Murphy. Jack Murphy is a DC native, the author of Democrat to Deplorable, the book that's on your screen right now. Jack, thank you for coming back to the program. I know you're back to back with interviews lately, but I think that's it's telling of just how straightforward, truth-talking you are. You go out there with your camera. Sometimes you get pushed around. You see what's really happening out there in your home city, which I've made my adopted city. And as a new person to Washington, D.C., I walk around the streets, I look at what's going on, and I think to myself, well, heck, I don't want to be here anymore. How do you feel?
I've lived here for 30 years. My kids were born here. I've actually built institutions, schools, and literally buildings in this city. I've been part of the turnaround here for 30 years. And got to tell you, I'm about ready to make the move out to the suburbs first and then out to the countryside. I've had enough. I've had enough of not only the riots, I've had enough of not only the destruction, the lawlessness, the sense of a lack of order and just chaos everywhere, but even my kids are being affected by it now. These ideas that BLM and Antifa are spreading are infecting everybody, and there's just tension. There's tension on the local playgrounds. I mean, the struggle is from the top all the way down to the bottom. Little kids are just mimicking the words that they hear from Black Lives Matter. There's racial conflict where there wasn't any before, and that depresses me. What I saw this weekend, I was out, as I do. I go out, I film, I participate, I go to witness. And what I saw was a tale of two countries. During the day on Saturday, I saw beauty. I saw red, white, and blue. I saw flags flying. I heard the national anthem recited by tens of thousands or more people at once, the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, it was moving. And these people were joyous and full of happiness and reaching out to each other to celebrate both themselves and the country. But as the night started to fall and then the tension started to build and rise, and it was clear that there was a second America there. There were people who wanted to destroy the beauty that they saw. They wanted to destroy people. They wanted to destroy flags. They wanted to destroy anything that they could in order to inflict sort of misery and pain on folks. I watched senior citizens get assaulted. I watched children get harassed to the point of tears. I saw a man get knocked out cold. I saw people fighting. I saw people squaring off in the streets, damage and harassment everywhere. And of course, this has been going on all summer long since the end of May and the George Floyd incident that kicked it all off. So this is nothing new. It's only accelerating, it feels like. And the air of lawlessness and uncertainty in the city is just stifling. And you add in COVID restrictions. And frankly, there are very few reasons to even live here anymore.
Do you think there's a new lockdown coming from Mayor Bowser?
Oh, 100%. As the cases are going up, all of the metrics are going to trigger additional lockdowns. We're seeing additional lockdowns already implemented in various other states around the country. I anticipate that there's going to be new stay-at-home orders eventually here and tighter controls implemented on everybody. And of course, it's just another reason to get out of the city, to get away from people, to socially distance. I want to socially distance from this mayhem. That's what I want to do. And I need to create a buffer for me and my kids.
Jack, a lot of people think of Washington, D.C. as an industry town, and in a lot of ways it is. But I think a lot of people forget that there are actually people who are from here and who have grown up here and who have built this city, right, with their bare hands, who have contributed like you have, like your family has, to making this place a better place. I remember when I first visited as an adult was, I think, 2009, so that's 11 years ago, and I remember how bad it was walking from Thomas Circle over to Union Station and how much that had changed. The fear is that it changes back now, and you know, there is every evidence out there, every piece of evidence out there to suggest that, you know, there are going to be neighborhoods that are no longer policeable. There are going to be neighborhoods that are back with how the Navy Yard was in Washington, D.C. And I understand, look, for a lot of people in the country, they shrug their shoulders, they go, hey, you know, it's the political capital, this is the political class, it's on their backs, it's on their shoulders, it's on their heads, a pox on their houses, they made this problem, they can live through it. But in a lot of senses, they don't care. They live in Colorama. They live in much nicer places than the places a lot of people have to live and work through these things. Look, Jack, we've got to go up against the break here, but I want to make sure we keep you over the break, and I want to bring you back. I want to talk about the potential for Muriel Bowser to be in a potential Joe Biden cabinet and what that means. Stick around. All right, well, I don't know where the time goes, but I want to thank Caleb and Shelley and Carol and Edward and all the others who have joined up to the National Pulse recently. You can go to the nationalpulse.com/support to support our work in investigative news. Look, I know I'm not a BS artist. I know that we're not a full functioning news site in the sense that I'm just simply not sitting by my desk publishing 50 stories a day about everything that's going on in the world. No, what we do is we do niche investigative news that nobody else will do. We go through the long reports, we search through the FEC database, we go through the FARA filings, we tell you the things that, CNN's K-file. They say, oh, we're the big investigative news outlet. We report on everything, left, right. No, they don't. So we do that from our side of the political aisle, and I thank everybody out there who supports our work in doing that. Our guest here is somebody that, I've watched him for a long time, followed him on social media for a long time, and I just thought, wow, this guy's onto something. He gets it. Firstly, he gets masculinity, right, which is severely lacking in our society nowadays. In a sense, Jack, I aspire to be more like you. I mean, I'm not sure I can do the whole thing without getting stopped at airports, right?
It's my quarantine beard. Quarantine beard. I wasn't going to shave it until quarantine's over, and it's just continuing on, man. So I'm kind of stuck now.
It's continuing. But, Jack, let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Boo-hoo. You live in a really nice city, one of the richest cities in the entire world, with some of the richest counties surrounding it. Boo-hoo, you're getting what the liberals in this city have continued to vote for. Why should I care?
Well, Raheem, there's more to life than living in a nice town with nice restaurants and good museums. I want to live in a town where I can send my daughter across the street to the park, and she can play with people of all colors and races without any problems. Instead, today I send my daughter to the park and she comes home crying because little black girls told her that they can't play with her because she's white, and then they throw sand in her face. I want to be able to go to my neighborhood.
Wait, Jack, stop. Is that true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. 100% true story. I'm feeling the emotion just in recounting it.
That's absolutely extraordinary. Their parents are telling them this? Their teachers?
I imagine that's where it's coming from, right? Kids don't grow up thinking that stuff. Kids have no idea what's going on. My kids have spent so much time around African-American kids that when they were like 4 or 5 years old, they asked me one day if their skin was going to turn black one day because they just thought it was kind of normal. And the point here is that I also want to be able to just go to my neighborhood commercial district and not be harassed by a team of Antifa terrorists like happened to me just the other day. I want to be able to go out to a restaurant and sit there outside on a cafe without being assaulted by a deadly weapon, which is what happened to gentlemen just this last weekend in Washington, D.C., or have a mob approach you and tell you that you must raise the fist in support of Black Lives Matter or else you're a Nazi and they're going to assault you and terrorize you. I don't want any of these things for myself, and I could care less about the museums at this point and care less about the restaurants. You can't even go to any of them anyway. There's more to life than just material goods. Living in peace and harmony with your fellow citizens is something I'm interested in. And right now, because of the rhetoric, because of critical race theory, intersectionality, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the Biden campaign, the progressives in the Democratic Party, because of that, everything is polluted. Everything. Relationships, school, education, everything is polluted.
Has Joe Biden or any senior Democrat out there condemned this weekend's violence?
Not that I have seen. I haven't seen any condemnation of it at all. In fact, it would be first for them to just even acknowledge, right? I think that the mainstream media didn't pick up on any of the stuff that we saw this weekend, didn't see what Drew Hernandez was working on and what Jorge has been working on, and guys at Daily Caller and all the Riot Squad. They didn't see any of that stuff. They're not talking about people getting knocked out cold and having their possessions stolen and rifled through as they lay there unconscious with blood seeping out of their nose onto the pavement. They're not talking about any of that stuff. They got to just pretend it didn't happen. They have to pretend that there's not an army of people squaring off in the street.
Jack, do you know how long CNN and MSNBC spent reporting on Antifa and BLM violence this weekend? Do you know how long over the course of 3 days?
I'm going to guess a big fat zero.
45 seconds.
45 seconds. Wow.
45 seconds over 3 days. The Newsbusters guy crunched the numbers. I feel sorry for them having to watch this stuff the whole time, but they crunched the numbers. 45 seconds talking about BLM and Antifa's activities over the course of 72 hours. Absolutely extraordinary. Jack, You've lived in the city for so long, you know full well Muriel Bowser, her politics, her behavior, her inability to really perform at any basic level in terms of serving the city and the people who live in the city. So how does it make you feel when it seems like Muriel Bowser is about to get a cabinet position in a presumptive Joe Biden government?
First thing, I knew Muriel Bowser back before she was even a council member in Ward 4. She got a seat because Adrian Fenty was elected. She was basically handed her spot. Then she just got sucked up by the green Fenty machine into being mayor with no qualifications or anything at all whatsoever. Then she locks the city down, says nobody can go to Delaware without quarantining for 14 days upon return. And what does she do right afterwards? She heads out to Delaware to meet with Joe Biden.
Have a little party.
It's not essential business for the District of Columbia representing the citizens. No, she's continuing what she did earlier. She was Michael Bloomberg's co-campaign chair. She's a Bloomberg lapdog. She's a stop and frisker. She doesn't believe in any of the things that the Black Lives Matter believes in. She doesn't even believe in the things that any of the people who voted her into office believe anymore. All she is a cold-blooded, calculated political animal at this point. And the fact that she said on this very same day that she locked us down, said we can't travel without doing 14 days worth of quarantine on return, boom, she's in Delaware celebrating with Joe Biden doing a central district business. Hardly. She's angling for a position within the administration because in D.C. it's a dead-end job.
At taxpayers' expense while
Indeed.
She's locking down taxpayers. Jack, but her replacement, her presumptive replacement, is far worse.
I can imagine. Anybody that runs for mayor in D.C. has got no aspirations for real anyway. This is a dead-end job. There's no senator spot here. There's no governor spot here. Being mayor is the end of the road. And so you see we have a long list of D.C. mayors that haven't done anything afterwards, and she's trying to make that different this time. And she doesn't have my respect, that's for sure.
Well, not to put you at the foot of a dead-end job, but Jack, who's going to run against the next Democrat candidate for D.C. mayor if Muriel Bowser takes it? I mean, can I ask you to do it? I mean...
You know, the funny thing is I'm a registered Democrat in the District of Columbia because I want to vote for mayor, and the mayor's race is decided in the Democratic primary, and you can't vote unless you're a registered Democrat. I have no idea who it's going to be, but woe on them, that's for sure.
Jack, we've got 20 seconds left here. Where can people find you on social media?
Jack Murphy Live on Twitter, Jack Murphy Live on YouTube, Amazon for the book, Democrats are Deplorable. Thanks for having me on, Raheem. You're
amazing. You're an inspiration. I know you've got a lot more interviews to do today. Your message is so important. Jack Murphy, thank you for joining us here. Thank you, audience, for joining us here on the National Pulse today. Stick around. David Brody's up next here on Real America's Voice, and we'll be back tomorrow at 3.